All right, this lesson is on drawing in After Effects, working with text, painting in After Effects, filling in all of that stuff with color and gradients and whatnot. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. We have the text tool. To use a text tool, all you need to do is do the T here. And if you go over here, you'll notice these panels automatically open that pertain to working with text. I'll go ahead and hit type and you can say hello. And you'll notice by default there's some settings that are already set. Yours might be black to white. I'm not sure. To change the fill color, all you need to do is you make sure you select it first and then go in here and change the fill color. Okay, so I just hit OK. You can change the stroke color. I'm just going to go ahead and double click it. This will pop up. I'm going to change it to a yellow orangey color here. I'm going to hit OK. I can change the font, and again, as long as it's selected, I can go to, say, Monaco or whatever. I can go to Palatino. Okay. I can change the size here. These are more for if you have paragraphs, multiple lines of text. This will change the next line how high or up. So if I go hello there, as long as I select these, I can change this difference here. I can go, say, 8. That'll put it really close together. I can go to 12. I can go to 48. Usually if this is 138, this number would need to be greater to make sure that there's some space in between that. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to like 150. I can type it in. Just clicked on it. Okay. If I wanted to make it smaller or closer together, then I can go to, say, 130. And that'll be a little bit closer. You usually don't want too much space in there. Okay. But that's pretty close right there. I could go in here, and if I tweak in here, I can change the spacing in between the letters. What that's doing is it's changing the spacing in between here. Okay. And then the stroke here, I can go and just slide across. It'll go to nothing, and that'll just completely remove your stroke. Or you can just up it if you want a stroke for some reason. Okay. And then there's these other settings here that we tend not to really use. This one, basically, it'll distort your font to be stretched out tall or to be expanded. And just as a good general rule of thumb, don't mess with those settings. Graphic designers don't mess with the integrity of fonts. All right. So there are small caps and things like that that you can mess with. These are all caps, so you could turn something into all caps all of a sudden. You can do small caps, so the big capital letter and then the smaller letter, as long as you set the initial one to a capital, it'll show it. So if I were to change this to a capital T, you'll see that like that. Okay. So we're going to I'll go ahead and turn that function off and on so you can see it again. Okay. All right. So those are some of your settings there: color settings, size settings, all that good stuff. Okay. These paragraph left justified, right justified would be if I wanted to make it go to the right where it lines up here, in the center where they're directly in the center, and then left justified. Okay. And these have to do more with paragraphs. We won't mess with any of these. You won't have paragraphs in your composition. I'm just going to go ahead and switch over to my black arrow, and I'm going to move it down here. You'll notice it created a layer, and it automatically names it whatever you typed in that text. Okay. And there's options in here where you could open it, you could go into text, and you could look at more different things so that you can animate it if you wanted to. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and close it. All right. Now, the other thing that you can do in here is you can create shapes with a simple shape tool. So as long as you click off of it, click off here. Okay. Now, the reason I say click off here is because if you don't and you're selected on this, you're going to do something else, like for masking, and we don't want that yet. That's a different lesson. So make sure you click off. You can go to your shape tool here. You can select any one of these shapes that you want. I'll go ahead and just select the rectangle because it's simple. Okay. And usually by default, it'll do whatever colors are here. So you can change these ahead of time if you want. I'm going to go ahead and do a fill color that's green and this yellowish color out here. I'm going to go like this. Okay. If you want to select a different fill color or a different stroke color, you can go here. And I double click there. Let's just say that. And for the stroke, you could do this. Okay. And then if you don't want this as big, as thick, you can just thin it out. This is a stroke. Okay. I'll leave it thick for now. All right. If you don't want a stroke at all, you can just set it to 0. Okay. You can also go to, I'm going to go ahead and put this back up so you can see it. Okay. You can also go to stroke options, and you have the ability to set it to no stroke here. You have the option to add a gradient to that stroke. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at regular, what it was before. Okay. For the fill color, you can do the same thing. You can change the fill options here. If you wanted to set it to say transparent, this is where you'd get that option. You'd hit none. Or if you wanted to add a gradient to it, you could add it here. Okay, and we'll go ahead and hit OK. I'm just going to show you where these settings can be changed for the gradient. If you go to the shape layer, you'll notice it opened up here. If you go to the rectangle here, you can see the different options, and you'll see this gradient option here. If we open that up, you'll notice there's these different things that you can edit here. Now these are a lot of these are to animate, but simple things like editing the colors, you can do that. So it says edit gradient, you can do that here. And we can select the white point and we can change it to a different color. So let's say that I wanted it to be this color here. I can go and I can change my black point, say that I want that one to be in the blue range, so I'll get there. You can change these sliders here, so you'll notice that it changes that point there. You can also create new swatches to add, so I just clicked anywhere down here and you'll notice it'll add one, just like in Illustrator or Photoshop. You go in here and you can add a new one, a new color. You can add a different color here, let's say, okay, you could do that, and then just depending on how you slide these is how that's going to transition. You want to get rid of any of these swatches, same thing, drag them out just like in Illustrator or Photoshop. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit OK. You can actually add gradients to the outside stroke as well. I'm just going to show you really quickly. You can say add a gradient, and then you go ahead and tweak the gradient settings here where you would edit the gradient for that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close these up. You can see it gets kind of cumbersome in here. I'm just going to go ahead and close these up. You'll notice that when you create the layer for this one, it doesn't auto name it for you. It doesn't call it a rectangle. It doesn't know what color it is or anything. So I have to go in here and rename it. To rename it, I'm going to right click, or on a Mac, control click. And then I'm going to hit rename. And then I'm going to call it colorful rectangle. Okay, something descriptive, something that anybody could jump onto your file and know kind of what you might be referring to. Okay, easy to transfer it amongst designers so that if you're working in a firm, you'd be able to work on it. Okay, all right, so that's done. Now you can also create shapes manually. So I'm going to go ahead, same thing. You don't want to just make sure that you're not selected on any of these layers. Click off of it. Okay, because otherwise it does something else. You're going to go ahead and select your pen tool here. But just know that even though it looks like the pen tool of Illustrator, every program has a quirky, different little way of drawing things, and this is one of them. So I'm just going to explain to you the different ways. But the pen tool works in a very similar fashion. You can just create a, say, a little heart here. I'm just going to start creating. Okay. Notice it's not exactly how I want it. Now in Illustrator, you would normally, if you wanted to modify any of these points or any of these lines, you would need to switch to the white direct selection arrow. And here it's not like that. You just go ahead and can grab directly at any of these anchors. It converts for you. Okay, so you can tweak that. You could also move the points just like that. No big deal. The other thing you can do is you can add points. You can just click on the line here and it'll add an extra point there in case you wanted to tweak that slightly and do a dent or something. I'm going to undo that. And then, but if you wanted to remove, you'd go here and you'd have this option to minus points on here. So you could remove that one if you wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and undo that as well. Okay, the other option is you have the convert vertex tool. And that's basically where you can turn something into a square point. Just click on a point. Or you can bring it back, click, hold down, and drag, and untangle that. And then redo that. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my pen tool. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and switch. I've selected it with the black arrow. By default, it's going to be in that grayscale if you go here, you can either change it, you can change the fill color, but it'll be in gradient. If you want a solid and you've already been working in gradient, but now you want a solid, you don't want to do this. You just want to instead go to the fill options and make sure and switch over to the solid color. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove the stroke altogether and hit OK. All right. Now, a lot of these options that are up here that you can change are also, if you were to open the shape, you could change them in here. But I usually tell people, don't start opening this unless you absolutely have to, because you're not animating yet. Just use the options that you have to change things up here. Okay. Now, the other thing that you can do in this program is you can paint. So to create a paint, also click off, make sure you're not on any layers. Go to Layer, New, Solid. And what this does is it creates a solid shape or background or kind of canvas that you can then paint on. So I'm going to go ahead and just call it painting. And then I'm going to leave the comp size, make comp size, so that everything is the same exact size. You can change a color here if you want a background color. Say that you want it to be on a green background, you can. You can hit OK. And what you'll notice is it appears that it just created a big box. And down here you see that there's a painting. Basically everything that was there beneath it is still there. It's just a big kind of canvas that you can paint on that screen. Now if you were to go in here and try to paint directly on it with your paintbrush tool, you'll notice that you still can't paint. It'll just move it out of the way. So what you want to do is you actually want to double click it. And what it does is it opens this layer painting layer. And with that, now you can start painting. By default, you'll always get these things to pop up here. You can select the brush, say here, like a fuzzy brush. If you don't like any of these brushes that are in here, some are angled, whatever, you can always go in here and you can change the diameter manually, make them bigger, make them smaller. You can change the angle. You can change the roundness of them, how round they are. You can change the hardness, if they're hard edge or soft edge, okay? You can change basically any of these settings here, and it's up to you what you want to mess with. Okay, in terms of color, you can change, you can leave something at, 100% opacity, which is basically fully non-transparent. Basically, it's opaque. You can't see through it. And you can change the color. So I'll go like this. And we'll just go ahead and go paint. And this is supposed to be solid. Okay. Now, if you change the opacity, I'll make this one kind of opaque. It'll look like the color changed, but it didn't really change. It's just that it's transparent. So you'll see when I paint over something, it's like this. And basically, this painting here, it'll automatically insert itself into the composition. This is the composition where all your animation is going to take place. When you're done with this, you can just close it, and you'll notice it's here. And if we turn it off, it's right on top of everything. Now, you may notice, hey, I just want the brush strokes to show up. I don't want this greenish background to show up. You can turn that off. At this point, I would suggest opening this because that option is in here. And if we go into Effects, Paint, you can see where it says Paint on Transparent. You can turn that on. And then it's apparent that the background disappears and just the strokes are visible. Now, you'll notice here you can start to see the transparency. You can see how this brush stroke, it covers up whatever's underneath it, but this one you can kind of see through it and see what's underneath it. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this up. All right. So there you have it. You have text, you have basic shapes, you have the heart. I'm going to go ahead and rename that. And then you have your painting. If you wanted to edit it more, you could double click it here and it would show up. I'm going to go ahead and close it. Or you could even double click it here and it would show up. And then we just close it. I would rename it, right click, rename it. You could just say Scribble Paintings. Okay. All right, that concludes your lesson. If you have any questions or want to know how to do something more specific, please be sure to contact me.